Let this be a lesson to toddlers everywhere. You tiny little 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds won't be spreading your bigotry and intolerance in the state-run British nurseries anymore. Got it? If your 3-year-old pal Oliver shows up to the sandbox one day and tells you that his new name is Olivia, you'd better not be confused by her new pronouns. Because if you are confused by Zer pronouns, Z can report you to the nurse, who will suspend you and send you home to Mommy. Then Mommy will have to take a few days off from her job at the Bigot Factory to watch you herself. And she deserves it for filling your racist little head with the idea that toddlers shouldn't be punished for being confused when they don't understand something. Newsweek reports, a British nursery's decision to suspend a toddler for abuse against sexual orientation and gender identity has triggered widespread backlash, prompting political statements and online debate about disciplinary policies in early childhood education. The unnamed child, aged 3 or 4, was suspended from a state nursery during the 2022 to 2023 academic year, according to data from the United Kingdom's Department for Education obtained by The Telegraph. Why would there be a backlash against punishing an intolerant toddler? What's the alternative? Not punishing him? How would he then learn not to question the ideology you're imposing on him? New figures from the Department for Re-Education show that school exclusions for transphobic or homophobic behavior rose from 164 in 2021 to 2022 to 178 in 2022 to 2023. During the same period, 94 children in state primary schools were either suspended or permanently excluded for alleged transphobic or homophobic behavior, including 13 pupils as young as 4 or 5. The disclosure has triggered backlash on social media, mainly from critics of transgender activism. Former NCAA swimmer and women's sports advocate Riley Gaines wrote on X, formerly Twitter, a 4-year-old boy in the UK was suspended from his nursery school for transphobia. Yes, you read that right. We have reached peak clown world. The only clowns here, Riley Gaines, are people who think biological men shouldn't be humiliating biological women in race after race after race. Think about it. If biological men don't keep biological women from winning first place at every swim competition, who will? So, if you have a problem with biological women being permanently excluded from winning the top spots in women's sports, why don't you biological women just go and form your own swim league? Author J.K. Rowling called the suspension totalitarian insanity and wrote, "If you think small children should be punished for being able to recognize sex, you are a dangerous zealot who should be nowhere near kids or in any position of authority over them." Sounds like J.K. Rowling and the intolerant toddler need to spend a few years in Azkaban so they can learn that questioning dangerous zealots is no longer tolerated in Muggle world. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer distanced himself from the incident. A spokesperson for Starmer told The Telegraph, obviously, the Prime Minister would not support those sorts of measures, while noting the specifics of the incident remain undisclosed. Pupils and staff should never be subject to abuse, but any action taken to tackle behavior should also be proportionate, the spokesperson said. Beyond commentary, the Department for Indoctrination said it expects schools to act decisively but fairly. Thank you, two-tier Keir Starmer, for pointing out that punishments should be proportionate. Of course, if some 80-year-old man deserves prison for complaining about the grooming gangs on Facebook, I don't know why a 4-year-old shouldn't be punished for using the wrong pronouns at the nursery. However, for many, the most troubling part of the case is its lack of transparency. No details have been provided about what the child allegedly said or did, leaving observers to question whether any genuine harm was done or whether disciplinary policies have crossed into absurd territory. This should be obvious by now, but if people find out about the tactics you're using to brainwash their children, they tend to get upset. So it's best to keep the reprogramming and the experiments you're performing a total secret. People can't get mad if they have no clue what's happening. Lord Young, director of the Free Speech Union, a non-governmental organization, told The Telegraph, "It beggars belief that schools are suspending children as young as 5 for breaching their transphobia policy. If your ideology is so rigid it justifies you punishing toddlers for not complying with it, that's a powerful argument for discarding it." Get your facts right, Lord Young. It's not children as young as 5, it's children as young as 3 to 4. Why didn't you learn to count? Get kicked out of the nursery, perhaps? A Department for Education spokesperson told The Independent, "All pupils and staff should feel safe and protected at school and should never face violence or abuse." Yes, the best way to make a toddler feel safe is to kick him out of the nursery for using the wrong pronouns. The surge in disciplinary actions for transphobia comes amid broader concerns about school behavior post-pandemic. According to the Department for Brainwashing and Child Experimentation, more than 787,000 pupils were suspended in 2022 to 2023, more than double the number from 2016 to 2017. Of these, 84,339 were primary school students, up 31% from the previous year. It's weird. You'd think that students who went through the pandemic would have learned not to question anything the government tells them. But no, here they are resisting their government programming. Why do educators need to condition people when they're young? Well, there's a glaring hypocrisy at the core of this movement, and kids need to be trained either not to notice it or, at the very least, not to mention it. It is the hypocrisy that must not be named. Watch how easy it is to spot. A very small percentage of people grow up with gender dysphoria. Biological boys feel like they're girls. Biological girls feel like they're boys. The percentages vary from place to place and from time to time, but the overall numbers when the DSM-5 came out were extremely low. According to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, gender dysphoria prevalence accounts for 0.005 to 0.014% of the population for biological males, and 0.002 to 0.003% for biological females. So, naturally occurring gender dysphoria is very, very rare. Should you be angry or upset at someone who has gender dysphoria? Of course not. They didn't decide to have gender dysphoria, so why would you blame or hate them? But suppose someone says, "We should find all the students who have gender dysphoria and condition them to behave in line with their biological sex, not with how they feel." In other words, suppose someone says, "If a boy feels like a girl, we will condition him to act like a boy anyway. And if a girl feels like a boy, we will condition her to act like a girl anyway." How would that message be received? People would say, "How dare you condition a child to feel like a gender different from the one he or she feels like naturally? If a boy feels like a girl, you have no right to change that through conditioning. And if a girl feels like a boy, you have no right to change that through conditioning. You have to let children just be themselves without you or anyone else influencing them on issues like gender." That's the rule, right? You shouldn't be pressuring kids to go against the way they feel. So, what's the problem? Well, I mentioned that naturally occurring gender dysphoria affects a tiny percentage of the population. And yet, the number of kids identifying as trans has been skyrocketing. Hollywood celebrities can proudly say that all the kids they know are trans.
I am here today as the mother of a proud trans man. I am here today as the aunt of a proud trans man. My best friend's kid is trans, and my kid's best friend is trans. My wife and I, our lives are filled with the most amazing, beautiful, brave trans people, young and old, but especially young.
Now, if gender dysphoria affects a tiny percentage of children, what are the odds that every other Hollywood celebrity has a trans kid or has adopted a kid who's soon transitioned? It's mathematically absurd to think that all, or most, or even a significant portion of these kids were born with gender dysphoria, which strongly suggests that the grown-ups around them are putting the idea into their heads. But what does that mean? It means that adults are conditioning children who don't naturally feel like they were assigned the wrong gender to feel like they were assigned the wrong gender. They're taking kids who don't feel like they're trapped in the wrong body and programming them to feel like they're trapped in the wrong body. Why would they do that? Because in Hollywood, having a trans kid is a far greater status symbol than having a designer bag or a designer dress or even an Oscar. And it's not just Hollywood. Schools are filled with trans kids far beyond the standard percentages. So adults are massively influencing the gender feelings of children. They're conditioning kids to feel a certain way when those kids wouldn't have felt that way apart from the conditioning. But wasn't that the cardinal sin, according to the trans movement? Wasn't the main rule that you shouldn't pressure or influence a child's feelings about gender? And yet, it's exactly what the champions of the movement are doing. This is the glaring hypocrisy I mentioned. If a child feels like he or she is a different gender, you must not, under any circumstances, pressure that child not to feel that way. But if a child doesn't feel like he or she is a different gender, it's perfectly acceptable to pressure that child to feel like he or she is a different gender. Sheer hypocrisy that even a child could spot. And that's why the British government has learned to start punishing kids while they're young. No one should be allowed to question the latest ideology of the latest government. Least of all, toddlers.